All right, in today's lesson, we're going to be finding the values of sine, cosine, and tangent that are greater than 360 or negative. So we will not be able to just find a reference angle. We have to do a little bit more work. So as I mentioned in day 2's video, I have these note cards. I would recommend that you write them somewhere. Put it on a sheet of paper, but have it with you. You'll need it for homework. So here's the 30, 45, 60s for the quadrant 1. Remember, you write 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3. Put them all over 2, and then radical the tops, and the top of 1 doesn't keep a radical because radical 1 is just 1. To find tangent, it's the sine value over the cosine. Here's my sine memorization. All students take calculus. And then you're also going to need your reference angles because we're going to always try to take something in quadrant 2, 3, and 4, put it back to 1, so that way we only have to memorize the first part of the unit circle. I have all that information off to the side here. So I have my quadrant 1 for my unit circles. I have my sine rules. And then I also have the reference angles. So you're welcome to write them on the side, but again, you will need to use them for homework. All right, so finding an angle that is over 360, and we did this a couple weeks ago, is you're first going to need to find the coterminal angle. Now, you really only need to do this if you have greater than 360 degrees or you have a negative radian or a negative degree. To find a coterminal angle, it's basically you're adding 360 or subtracting 360 to this 570 in order to get a number that's between 0 and 360, so it's in our unit circle. So we're going to go ahead and take 570 and subtract 360. That's going to give us 210. And now we're going to continue like we did on day 2. So day 2, we found the quadrant that this lied in. So this will be, so we're going to look for the quadrant. So 210 degrees is in quadrant 3. The next thing we did was we talked about the different sines. So if I go to my chart for my sines, because I'm in quadrant 3, tangent is the only sign that will be positive, and I'm finding sine, cosine, and tangent. So you're finding all of them this time. So your sine will be negative, cosine will be negative, and tangent will be positive. So we're doing all 3 this time. The last part is to find the reference angle. To find the reference angle, again, we're going to look at our sheet. So we are in quadrant 3 currently. So reference angle, we're going to do 0 minus 180, and we're going to do it to the 210 number. So you're going to do 210 minus 180 equals 30 degrees. This 30 degrees is to help us reference these points here so that we can find sine, cosine, and tangent. So our sine, and when you're saying which degrees, go back to the original. Sine of 570. Sine we said is negative. And for 30 degrees, we know that that's a 1/2. So sine is negative 1/2. And now we'll do the same with cosine and tangent. Cosine of 570 degrees, it's negative as well. So I'm going to get my negative. It's radical 3 over 2. And then lastly, tangent of 570 degrees is going to be positive, and it's sine over cosine. So negative 1/2 over negative radical 3 over 2. When you do this, we talked about this before, how you're allowed to cross off your denominators. So the negatives will also cancel off, and that'll leave me a 1 over radical 3. You're not allowed to have a radical in the denominator, so multiply top and bottom. I'm going to start skipping this step, so when you see this, just please hopefully remember that it's just rad 3 over 3, because it will not change. So anytime you're left with a 1 over radical 3, we're just going to go straight to the answer. And that's number 1. So let's try that again. So we're going to first find the coterminal angle. I forgot my highlighter. So this is kind of the steps that you take for each of these. So if you follow through this, you should be fine. Okay, those are the 3 steps. So when I number a 1 and a 2 and a 3, that's what I'm getting. So find the coterminal angle. So this time it's negative, so we're going to add 360 to it because we're trying to get it to go back to a regular circle. So negative 420 plus 360 is going to be negative 60. Now that's still a problem, cannot be negative. So we're going to add an additional 360 to it and do it again. And that's going to leave us with an angle of 300 degrees. The quadrant that 300 degrees sits in is quadrant 4. The sine's in quadrant 4. So if I look here, cosine is the only thing that's going to be positive. So my sine will be negative, cosine will be positive, tangent will also be negative. Find the reference angle. So in quadrant 4, the reference angle says to do 360 minus theta. And I think I called that 0 earlier. 360 minus theta. So we're going to do 360 minus 300, which is going to give me 60 degrees. And now that I have it back to my quadrant 1, I can go ahead and go to my chart. So 60 degrees. So I'm going to be finding sine, cosine, and tangent. So let's go ahead and start. So sine, again, make sure you use your original angle of negative 420 equals, so sine is negative, so let's get a negative on there. And then sine is radical 3 over 2. Cosine of negative 420 degrees is going to be positive 1/2. Tangent of negative 420 degrees is going to be sine over cosine. So a negative radical 3 over 2 over a 1/2. So please don't forget that those denominators can just cancel. So the 2's on the bottom are allowed to both go away. And I'm left with a negative radical 3. It's over 1, but we don't need the 1. So we're done there. No radicals in the denominator, so we're good to go. So that's basically for degrees. So now we're going to go through and do the same thing for the radians, which I know is a little trickier for some of us. So let's go ahead and start. So for these, we're going to do the exact same thing, but everything in terms of pi. So we're going to first find the coterminal. So 15 pi over 4, I need to subtract 2 pi. So if I subtract 2 pi, so put this over 1 times 4 times 4, this will be 15 pi over 4 minus 8 pi over 4, which is going to give me a 7 pi over 4. Figure out what quadrant 7 pi over 4 lands in. That is in quadrant 2. The signs in quadrant 2, only sine is positive, so I know sine will be positive, cosine will be negative, tangent will be negative. And some of you may think this step is a waste, but it just one less thing for you to have to remember. So if you just write it down, then you're not missing anything. But you should be using all 3 of these charts, or if you put them on a note card, on every single problem, on homework as well. For number 3, we're going to try to get this to go back to quadrant 1. So we're in quadrant 4.